right now on TikTok, and you've got actual, you've really got questions, you need a bit of help, then definitely go over to the YouTube channel, Back in Shape Program, because it's so much easier for me to manage the comments and actually get through them all on YouTube just because of the platform. So just bear that in mind, guys. So the main topic for today, why your back pain is not getting better, but I will just jump into this question that we've got here from JGL 2002. I have sciatica, I'm doing PT, but it isn't doing much. What should I do? And the biggest thing is, what are we doing for PT? And this is the thing that I think a lot of you guys struggle with, because you say, well, I'm doing my physical therapy or I'm doing my physiotherapy and I'm not actually getting any better. We have to dissect, what are we actually doing for physical therapy? If it's knee hugs, child's pose, cat-camel, cat-cow. I was speaking to a member yesterday on one of the consultation calls, and that was the kind of stuff they were given, and this was going to strengthen the back. They got told, oh, don't do any hip hinging or squatting, but do this funny hip hinge with a pole behind your back. That's not strengthening anything. And that's really, really important. And I suppose that segues really nicely into the topic of today's live stream, why your back pain isn't actually getting better. And the big thing that I wanted to cover to you guys, so you can understand this, is much of what you're doing every single day outside of the physical therapy, if that's not addressed, which it probably isn't in this sort of scenario with your physical therapy, because you go there and you do physical therapy and then you go home. And so you go to a physical therapy or physiotherapy appointment and you have half an hour, maybe an hour, and there's a bit of chat and a bit of stuff and a bit of chat at the end. And so there's a very small amount of time where you're actually doing something with instruction and guidance, and then you're off on your own for the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it may be, to just do stuff. And that stuff is, infinitely variable from one individual to the next. And there's often next to no guidance or instruction or support on those kind of things. And that is why so many people struggle. We cannot expect to have a 1 hour appointment with our physical therapist or do 1 hour of work from a rehabilitation point. For example, in the program, we have the relief routines, which are somewhere from 8 to 12 minutes long, maybe a little bit longer as well. There's 1 or 2. And then we've got our actual workouts themselves, which are generally speaking under 30 minutes. So that's maybe an hour of work. We can't possibly expect to get long-term results and fix our back pain and sciatica if we're only focusing on 1 hour of the day with our back in mind. Because so often we then have kids to look after, we've got to go to work, we've got to do this, that, and the other, walk the dog, make dinner, eat, clear away. All of that kind of stuff is still being done every single day, but with no guidance, no awareness. And that's not to say you have to stop all of that stuff, but a little bit of thought goes a big way. And this is why in the membership material anyway, we have so much in the way of education to help you guys understand that, the way in which we're doing things. If you'll get, like, simply, right? Why are we doing a squat as an early part of rehabilitation? The reason we're doing a squat is because most of you guys sat right now watching this video. If you're watching on TikTok or if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to get out of a chair when it's finished. Maybe you're going to stay sat down, which is a whole nother problem. How are you doing that? If you have no guidance on how to do that, then we've got a problem. And then you go to your physical therapy appointment and they say, oh, we're going to do sit to stand as an exercise, which could be seen as a good, not too bad exercise. But if you can't control your spine, as a lot of people can't, at a squat of that depth, then that's too hard for you and you're not going to progress. You're just going to be doing sit to stand till you're blue in the face. How does a sit to stand progress over time? All of these things need to be factored in. So that's one of the reasons that your rehab may not be doing anything for you. And it's not that rehab can't help you. It's not that physical therapy or exercises can't help you, but they need to be done in a programmed way, and they need to actually be exercises that build strength and stability. And an exercise itself, a squat, does not necessarily build strength or stability unless you do it in a way that will build strength and stability over the long term. And that starts out with doing it with correct technique. So just going through some of the other comments that are coming in on here, have a little look. Dr. Muna, he said, I am 6 months postpartum. Congratulations. After a C-section and my back aches because of a weak core. What can I do? This is just the example that I'm really thinking of because I saw a comment earlier on in one of the comments on the live stream on TikTok. Was about this kind of scenario. The lady that had commented obviously had young children. And this is the issue, right? We'll be worried about doing exercises whilst looking after a 6-month-old, which means you're picking them up, maybe feeding them, maybe holding them a lot, maybe rocking them, etc., etc., etc. You've got the cradle that you're putting them down in, or the cot, sorry. We're bending over and putting the little one down and picking them up. And you're doing that while you're half asleep in the middle of the night. Oh gosh, you're not thinking about your back. And so the mistake here is looking at core exercises, thinking that you're just going to do some abs, whatever that really means. In actual fact, some of the most useful exercises here, once we've learned how to engage the core, is going to be movements like the squat and hip hinge, because you are going to be doing those as a new mum, or maybe a mum of a new child, if you've got other kids, many, many times every single day. This is exactly the point that I was talking about. I'm so glad you've commented, Dr. Muna. This is the reality. But even in this particular scenario, we can still get better. Now, we have to acknowledge, if we've had a C-section through here, we have had a break in the abdominal wall. Often ladies, even if you haven't had a C-section, struggle to reconnect the brain with the area of the pelvis or the area of the core between the belly button and the pubic bone, right? This is the section that is adjacent to the L4-5 and L5-S1 section of the lower back. Not to mention the fact that we have a rapidly growing baby that's an increasing weight that we're exposing ourselves to every day. So we need to try and catch up that process. Learning the technique first of how to engage the core, using exercises like the dead bug, the marching bridge, and even simpler versions of those. And then leveraging real world exercises like the squat, the hip hinge, the step up, the single leg hip hinge. Those are the formula, the pathway to actually rebuilding strength. And if we've got a little one that's growing like that, they're going to start crawling, they're going to start walking, they're going to do all sorts of stuff, right? You're going to have to catch up a little bit in terms of your technical competence. And the weight probably will need to catch up as well in terms of the weight that you're using on exercises like the squats and hip hinges. But this is just one example. And the good news is that we can still get better if we really dial things in. Yes, we've got a few disadvantages compared to the average person because we have a child who is wholly dependent on us. Most people just have a job that isn't 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in spite of that commitment, I do think the worst job to have if you are someone who has a herniated disc, sciatica, or back pain in general is going to be being a parent to a new child, you know, because there's no way you will always put yourself second in that scenario. Everybody else who's got a job and they think they've got it hard, you do, but you can work around that because at some point in the day you go home and you can do your work from there. You can focus to dig down deep into your rehabilitation work. Dig down into your relief-based exercises. This is all the kind of stuff that we talk about in the program, guys. Relief-based exercises, those of you guys on TikTok and on YouTube, we have example videos of these on the channels. You guys can go and search them out. If you want to just have something that you can do, then you can always get involved in the program as well. So just looking through some of these other questions, I do hope that was helpful. I'm just trying to go back through some of the TikTok. And guys, those of you on YouTube, if you've got any comments, you can post in the comment section. Flossie said, I have spinal stenosis. Surgery only helped a little bit. How can I relieve the pain? The first and most important thing, and this is, again, so important, is education. The problem is not spinal stenosis. You didn't have an operation on the spinal stenosis. You had an operation on something. It might have been a dissectomy. It might have been a laminectomy or something like that. The understanding that you have a back injury and that spinal stenosis is a comment on the feature. You know, if we were describing a criminal, we might say they had brown hair, right? But that doesn't tell us the whole picture. Spinal stenosis is just a descriptive factor that you've got a disc bulge or herniation of significant magnitude enough to create a narrowing of the space. What we can do to relieve the pain is not focus on the pain, but focus on the injury. So we need to start to restore stability. And we do two things. We focus on strengthening work, which is building strength and stability and resilience back into the spine. And then we focus on the side on relief-based practices. These are things that relieve the symptoms. So it might be things like towel decompression, using a small rolled up towel, lying over that. We've got examples of this as well on the page. Contrast bathing to help manage the excess inflammation. That is one of the challenges that we have when we have stenosis. We have a smaller space. The smaller space fills up faster, and then irritates the nerves a little bit more readily. And so minor strains to the injury, a minor worsening of the condition, or not even that, just a minor flare-up, will often lead to significantly greater discomfort or symptoms. But we focus on the injury rather than the symptoms, rather than trying to relieve the pain. If we focus on the injury, then we get lasting relief of the pain. If we focus on the pain, especially when we've been told we have stenosis, we will often get given exercises like knee hugs and child's pose, which only serve to open out the space where the nerve comes out at the cost of the underlying problem. And that's again why education is so important. Once you guys understand this, you can move forwards with the expectation that it's going to take a little bit of time, but that you're building an actual full recovery strategy rather than, you know, some quick fixes that don't ultimately worsen the problem. Rio Jungle has said, I don't know why I'm not feeling my core when doing the dead bug or marching bridge. Something else before that, please, what's wrong? One of the important videos that we have in the program when you start off is activating the core. And Roy, we're probably not engaging the core correctly. That's going to be the simple truth. You should be able to This isn't a criticism like, oh, you're a lost cause if you can't. It's just an important realization. If you've been struggling with back pain or sciatica and you can't engage your core correctly through this section here enough to give yourself a little bit of a crampy, pumpy sensation, like I'm sure most of you guys could go over, and ladies obviously, could go over and pick up a very light weight, ignoring the back for a moment, and just do bicep curls like so until you feel a pump in the bicep. A great example of this, which you can do in real time that doesn't involve using any weight, is if you guys just stick your arm out and just do small circles like this, right? You just do small circles like this for the next few minutes, and you're gonna feel a tension, a throbbing, an activation of these muscles. You can poke them because you can feel they're hard, right? And you just keep doing small circles while I'm talking, right? You're activating this and you're aware of it. You should be able to get that level of control through your midsection without even doing a dead bug, without even doing XYZ core exercise. That shows you're actually engaging it. Otherwise, you're not really engaging it. You're just doing bicycles, right? A proper dead bug will be on the floor, engaged tightly, and then coming out, and then coming back, and coming out, and then coming back. Or we can do a lazy dead bug and just do this. This is doing nothing, right? It's doing absolutely nothing. I could be here for the next few minutes before I get bored more than anything else. That is not doing anything for strengthening. And this is also why you actually need tutorials to do these things correctly. You don't just watch, and so often people ask, oh, can you just give me a quick 10-second video on a dead bug? And it's not, because how you do it makes a massive difference. So there's like a 15 to 20 minute video on how to do the dead bug, then all the variations that we have, for example, in the program. It's that we're not doing it correctly. And the biggest mistake that people make often on the dead bug specifically, and the other core exercises, is they do not control the spine properly. They do not engage the core with correct vigor. And when they try to, often because of a lack of skill, which improves if you practice it, conversely, you will not get better at any of this if you don't do it. That's an important point, but you need a bit of guidance. And so if you don't engage the core, you're just wiggling around, and then your spine will move, and then you'll hurt yourself. You won't create any significant damage because you're on the floor and the forces are very, very small. But if we can't even control ourselves lying down on the floor and activate our core, how on earth are we controlling ourselves when we're on a dog walk? Or when we're looking after the little one, or when we're going to work, or when we're doing anything else? Someone asked the other day, I think it was in the Facebook group for the members, they said, hey, how do I push open a door? I've got a very stiff front door and sometimes I need to give it an extra shunt. Well, if you don't know how to engage yourself, you're just going to buckle under the pressure and the door's going to beat you. So you need to have the ability to consciously engage yourself when doing something. And even now, sitting here talking to you guys, doing it with vigor, I can feel that I've done something to my core. You should be able to do that. Even if it's just lying on the bed, you should be able to get that level of engagement. And that doesn't mean you're faulty if you can't. It means you just haven't practiced it. So give yourself a break if you're thinking, oh, well, Mike, I can't even do that. Am I a lost cause? Sign me off. Right? No. The answer is to do it, but also to realize that actually it is quite difficult. And there's a lot of people that struggle with it. So don't beat yourself up if you can't do these things. Just looking through some of the other comments. What else have we got here? Just scroll down through here. It's nearly 2 years after a microdiscectomy. It takes time to settle down. Recovery isn't linear. Recovery certainly is not linear. I was going to say is then. Recovery certainly is not linear. But to the degree you execute on your rehabilitation work correctly and build resilience after a microdiscectomy or any other sort of injury, there is absolutely no reason you can't get back to doing things that you previously thought you were striked out from doing. Great example I know, and certainly within 2 years, I was within about 6 or 7 months post-microdiscectomy, back competing in competitive jiu-jitsu environments, successfully, might I add. Someone that I used to train with. And so like that is possible. It's how you do that. Now we, as individuals that have maybe a bit of a background in this kind of stuff, are at an advantage, just like the mechanic whose car breaks down is at an advantage in fixing it, just like the computer engineer whose laptop has a bit of an issue with it can fix it very quickly. But what we're trying to do on these lives and things like that is impart some of that wisdom to you guys so you can get the support needed to go through the process faster rather than waiting 2 years, because 2 years is too long, quite honestly. It's great that it's got better in 2 years, better than not better in 2 years, but it's still too long. It's not that, it doesn't need to be that long at all. But I'm glad you're better anyway. Diana said, sit at a desk during the day into stop, you're putting anywhere from 40 to 90% more load through your lumbar spine. If you're new to the live sessions, this is an important number that you want to bear in mind for your lower back, because most of you guys have issues down at the L4-5, so here and here, and L5-S1 sections of the lumbar spine. When you sit down, you put anywhere from 40 to 90% more load through the lumbar spine. What does that mean for you? Calculated as a percentage of your body weight. If you are sitting on the edge of the bed with your herniated disc, you are putting anywhere from 20% of your body weight more through that disc to 45% more body weight through that disc. So if you weigh, like me, around about 90 kilos, and maybe 50 kilos of is your upper body weight, you're going to be putting anywhere from 20 kilos to 45 kilos more load through that lumbar disc. And to the degree you slouch more, you're straining the posterior fibers even more so. That is the back fibers. This is why most often you guys have these posterior disc bulges. It's going backwards. Now, there's an extra layer of nuance here that is important, because you will notice on all of the models that you get, they're always bulging to the side. Why is this? We have a very thick longitudinal ligament that runs along the front of the vertebra. And you guys can always look at this on Google. It's quite interesting to see the actual layers of support for our spine. Very important, and I'll get to a punchline on this in a moment. You then have a smaller and narrower posterior longitudinal ligament which runs in the gap here between these two bony pillars. And that obviously is smaller than the one on the front because it's got these bony bits in the way, but it acts as a reinforced part of the disc behind the disc, which is not present over here, which is where those disc bulges usually go. So they will try and migrate. As you squash down on the front, we've all had a donut, and I know some physical therapists and osteopaths and chiropractors don't like the jam donut analogy, but it really is a very simple and helpful one, because the discs do bulge back to the side. Why do they bulge to the side? If you ever have that jam donut and you can see the little hole where the jam was injected, that is a weak point. If you squash down on the front, the disc preferentially moves through, not the disc, sorry, the jam preferentially moves out through the path of least resistance. It doesn't break through the dough immediately, it goes through that little hole. And that's exactly the same as your discs. The path of least resistance is these 2 points here. Now granted, sometimes you do get a broad-based disc bulge, it just goes back entirely, but often they're going slightly more to one side or the other, and that is going to be why. But think about what we're doing every single day. When you think about all of the layer of ligaments, there are many ligaments: the supraspinous ligament, the interspinous ligament, the ligamentum flavum, the posterior longitudinal ligament, a number of ligaments on the back here and one on the front. Why is that? Because we are supposed to have a natural lordosis, a natural backward bending curve in our lumbar spine. We have significantly more support on the back here to maintain that curve. Yet so many of us sit for hours every day like this. Don't take it from me. A great bit of research that I found a while ago was from the British Heart Foundation, because they're looking at obesity and heart disease. And they had concluded from their research and investigations that the average adult in the UK spends 9.5 hours sitting every single day. And that means for a good number of us, we're spending more than that time every day, sitting, squashing through our lumbar spine, eliminating that lordosis, driving through the front of the donut, driving the fluid into those posterior annular fibers. And because we don't do anything to build objective strength and stability in our spine, it then becomes a cause of repetitive strain, and we have this episode of back pain that gets worse and more frequent episodes, and now it's sciatica, and now we have to do something about it, when we could have done something a little bit sooner, might I add. But that's one of the reasons we have these things over and over again. I did see something relatively recently, which was actually looking at prehistoric cultures, if you will, or something to that effect. And also cultures nowadays that don't use seats as much. So I'm thinking of certain places around the world. And one of the things that they mentioned was those cultures and peoples do spend the same sort of time sitting, but it's often interspersed with a lot more activity. So they're sat down for 10 or 15 minutes and then they get up. They're sat down or squatting down for 10 or 15 minutes and then they get up. And that's very important, because there's a process that takes place in the lumbar spine called creep. It's not in the lumbar spine, it's not unique to the spine, it's unique to ligaments. And so when you constantly strain them, when you constantly flatten out that curve and hold it for minutes or hours while you're sat at your desk, like that, those structures start to stretch and deform a little bit more. Then you go and suddenly jump out of the chair and you go, oh, my back goes, because you put strain on that ligament that's been pulled a bit further than ordinary. So a little bit of a tangent there. Hopefully it's helpful. If you guys have any questions, you can always post in the comments on that particular topic. Just going over to YouTube quickly, and then I'll come back over to TikTok, guys. Move this go through these spines sometimes because I move them around way too much. The spine can't handle it. Roy said, can you tell me why when I'm standing for a long time I feel pressure in my lower back? Because you've got a back injury and you are loading it for an extended duration. Everybody will have a failure point. If I said carry, carry the 36 kilo kettlebell, right? If I said it to a person that doesn't have back pain, if I said just hold this, there is a point at which you're going to have to let go, right? Because the strain on the tissues that are taking that strain has moved to such a cumulative point at which they have failed. Perfectly reasonable. And so when you are standing for an extended period, you are just squashing down, and there is a point at which it fails. Focus less on the point at which it fails and more on building your rehab. And what you notice over time is that that point at which it fails, that point at which you start to get symptoms, moves further and further back. There is always a failure point for all of us. If we said to anyone, and anyone that you know that doesn't have back pain or an injury to their lower back or any other area, stand on the spot until I say stop, and then come back to them a week later, they will be in a heap. Everybody has a failure point. The point is that when you have an injury, your failure point is brought to a point in time that is inconvenient, to say the least, right? Standing in the queue at the shops for 5 minutes. Now all of a sudden you've got raging sciatica. And the job of your rehab is to push that limit back out to where it should be so that it doesn't interfere with your daily life. Christian has said, I read that cobras might help posterior herniations go back in place. I don't think the cobra has the same kind, the cobra doesn't have the same kind of effect as something like the towel decompression because it typically pulls on the front part of the vertebra. It doesn't create a full decompression of the segment itself because it's what's called an extension compression rather than two modes of, I'm trying to get something I can use to demonstrate. One of the bands. So this will be really helpful to show you guys the difference between the two exercises. I will over-exaggerate it a little bit, but this is actually a really good band. Thank you for that question, Christian. So pretend for a moment this is your spine. You can see that there are wrinkles in the band, okay? We'll use this, we'll use my knee, okay? If I just do a cobra, your spine is like so. If I just do a cobra, I bend backwards. Nothing happens to the wrinkles. If I do the towel, I go like so. Now the wrinkles start getting stretched out. Why is that? Because when I'm bending backwards with the towel in place, I am actually creating an elongation. I'm forcing it to bend over a longer period. So the towel not only bends backwards, but it also creates elongation of the column in of itself. This is more pronounced, say, for example, on something like a Lateral, which actually creates a proper decompression effect at the level of the spine. If I just take my fingers at the same 2 points and just bend backwards, there is no real elongation of the column that I am using. That is the big and most important difference between the towel decompression and just bending backwards by a cobra. You might refer to this as a two-way method of traction versus an extension compression mechanism of traction, but that means probably very little to many of you watching this right now. But no, suffice to say that all we care about is the length of the column. And when we just bend backwards, like in the cobra, nothing changes. And when we bend over the towel, you can see the difference in the actual length and the concertina of the fabric of the band, illustrating the elongation that takes place when we do it in a slightly different way. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Any other questions, you guys? We'll carry on going. Sorry if I keep knocking you on TikTok. There's always these little grooves on the mats below me, and I always catch them. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're doing great. And guys, if you know anyone else who's struggling with their back pain, you can always share this with them. This is the last live of this week, by the way. PJ has said, I feel better every day with the Core 5. That's great to hear. But I have a problem. Two things. Picking up and tying my shoelaces, even with deep squat, I am missing like 4 centimeters of distance from the floor. That's tough. And I don't want to bend down to aggravate the back. Any tips? Well, firstly, if you're tying your shoelaces, grab your leg, lift it up, put it on a chair. Now I do hardly any bending. Nice and easy one. If they're on the floor, okay, you can flick them up with your foot. You can use a picker. You can also go up on your toes. Now, this is an example, and this is the reality. Unfortunately, a lot of you guys injure your back, especially if you've had it for a long period of time. Not so true for those of you maybe that haven't had it for a long period of time. You don't have strength, period, which is why you struggle so much. But if you do have a degree of strength, when you first injure your back, you've often got relatively strong legs, but we've been unfortunate, we've injured our back. So you can compensate. So in PJ's scenario, when he wants to pick something up off the floor, he can just go up on his toes. This is not ideal. It does put strain on the knees, but if your knees are okay, then you can do this. If your knees are not okay, I would argue that's because your knees are weak. They are weak, which led to injury, which led to less activity, which led to more weakness, which is a downward spiral. You can turn that around, but it requires a lot of work, faith, and education in the process, which makes the world of difference. Hopefully that helps, PJ. Thank you for the question. But the simple reality in these scenarios is when you guys have a back injury, you have to, unfortunately, try your best on many activities that you're doing every day that you just can't do perfectly. And doing your best is better than not doing anything at all or not trying at all. And focus on building your rehab. As you progress with your rehab, those sorts of things get easier again. Can you bend over and do something bad? Yes. Is it smarter for me to just pop my foot up here and do my shoelaces? Just because I can do this with a rounded lower back doesn't mean it's the smartest move. Doing this makes way more sense. So it's also about building good habits. You see some people say, oh, well, the spine's supposed to bend. That's fine, but it doesn't mean we need to be obtuse about the whole process. And so part of this process of getting better from back pain is also changing some of the habits that you've had develop over the years so that you can do things in a more back-friendly, healthy way. Something to bear in mind. I could go into that in more detail, but seeing there's a couple of comments coming in through here, so I'll go through that a little bit later. Michael has said, so you also had a herniated disc yourself because of jiu-jitsu? No, I did not have a herniated disc because of jiu-jitsu. I did have a pars fracture back in 2013-14 of my L5, but I have not had a herniated disc specifically. Yeah, I can't remember how long it took me to recover, but I was very lucky. The day that it seemed to occur, the fracture that is, I was working in a clinic where we did our own x-rays. And so I was like, boom, straight in there. I was relatively new and asked the managing director to have a look at the x-rays and my colleague as well to have a look at the x-rays, talk through it all and, hey, get back to work, unfortunately. Get back to work and get treated by your colleague multiple times a day and off we go. Back then it was all adjustment work, so your traditional chiropractic type work. I'm not a chiropractor, I'm an osteopath, but worked in, at that time in chiropractic clinics. Doing that kind of approach, but it was all image work. So I was very lucky to be able to get that stuff done straight away. But yeah, you know, there'll be plenty of people though. The example I was mentioning earlier, Michael, was not me specifically. That was someone that I used to train with or trained at my gym last year. Last year, no. Although actually, no, it might have been, was it this year? They used to train at the gym last year, but it happened over the course of 2025. Nat has said, I had a dissectomy at L5S1 7 weeks ago. For a week now, my back and left leg and top of the foot is biting. It feels like my skin will burst. Someone, yep, that's tough, Nat. That is definitely very tough. We've got to do the rehab work. Unfortunately, I strongly suspect that Nat has been given the guidance to just walk, not do too much bending and lifting, and that's been about it. And go back to work in 6 weeks or try your physio. And I don't think that's a good move. I don't think that's a good move. If you happen to be a surgeon watching this and you want to comment, please do. I do not think that's a good move. You're taking a patient that has basically paid 10K to go private. You know, the point is, I suppose, that their job was to do the dissectomy. And this is the big issue that needs to be addressed. And I don't know how it's addressed specifically, other than educating the individual population, that you've paid, I would argue, or I'm trying to rationalize this, so I may not be 100% spot on here, but you have paid a clinic to do a microdiscectomy. They have done a microdiscectomy. And in their eyes, they're like, you paid us to do a microdiscectomy, we've done a microdiscectomy, goodbye. Go and get some help. Now, they might have offered you some other thing, I don't know, I have no idea. But this happens all the time. The expectation is that for the patient is that I'm having a microdiscectomy to fix my back pain. The job of the surgeon is to do the microdiscectomy. And so you can see how there's immediately a unspoken contradiction in interest, in metrics, in evaluation points. Now, some surgeons, of course, many surgeons will say, oh, no, we're doing this to help the person, and we work very closely with a physical therapy department or with a physiotherapy department, and my job is to do the surgery, and their job is to follow you up with a rehab. And that's how it's supposed to be. And I completely appreciate there was, no option other. If Nat is saying here that I had no choice, I didn't want to wait and I didn't want to, do anything, or the NHS didn't want to do anything. But this is a really bad approach, unfortunately, in my opinion. You should have been given rehab. At the end of the day, it's never too late, right? There's plenty of people that have come to us having Microdiscectomy surgeries, not been given the guidance, because we have to remember, what is the problem? The problem is not the disc herniation. The problem, if we are being specific to help you understand the solution, is the fact that the annulus has broken. What is the microdiscectomy doing? It is chopping this bit away. It is not doing anything for the actual injury that is there. Your injury is no better after you've finished. You are no more capable of dealing with the injury after you've had the microdiscectomy, unless you have had education and guidance, etc., etc. And that said, so is this nerve damage then, or what could it be? It's just the fact that you've got a constant injury to the annulus fibrosus that may or may not be irritating the nerves at that level. And it's that simple. The focus often is on the nerve, and it's nothing to do with the nerve specifically. All pain that you experience is mediated through the nerves. So to say it's nerve pain is fundamentally true of all pain that we might experience. But the injury is the problem. The injury is the disc that has been operated on, specifically the annulus fibrosus, because that is what is bearing the load. And if we don't get given guidance on how to protect that section of the spine, then there's no reason to suggest we're going to be any better healing this time round post-op than we were beforehand. Now, the rationale or the hope, I would suggest, in the part of the individual who's having the surgery, assuming it's non-emergency, which in this case would kind of fit that bill, because I'm assuming the NHS, as per the comment, have not wanted to do the surgery. But the idea might be that if we can do the surgery and you're feeling better, like only in the last 24 to 48 hours, I've had someone comment on one of the comments saying, I had a microdiscectomy and I feel brand new afterwards, because the disc that was pressing on the nerve has been removed, but we must then do the rehabilitation work to deal with the underlying problem, which is the fact that we've damaged the disc. And then we will continue to damage the disc afterwards if we are not given the guidance, strengthening work to do in order to get better. And so this is very much comes down to, unfortunately, that lack of guidance. It's not the patient's fault, unfortunately. We're only coming to this to find this out because things haven't worked. But there does need to be guidance. This is why in the program, for example, I've said it many times before, there are hundreds of videos that members work through as they go through the program. And you might be saying, oh, well, that sounds too much, that sounds too onerous. It's like, okay, do you want a quick fix? Because quick fixes don't work. They don't provide lasting results. There is an education that needs to take place. And around about 60%, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, of the material of those hundreds of videos is education. So we can understand these things and not trip ourselves up, unfortunately. What else have we got in here? Just trying to check I haven't missed any of the comments. Christian said, my MRI shows compression almost the whole width of the nerve, but the report describes it mild to moderate. How is that? I'm not too sure. Those two things would perhaps indicate that there is a contradiction. However, Christian, it might be that they are saying that there is a closing of the hole, and maybe one part of that report is referencing the disc bulge and the size of the hole that's coming out rather than the nerve specifically. It might be that it's not necessarily been worded as effectively, because on the surface of it, that looks like it's contradictory. Roy has said, I feel better for days when using myofascial release work, followed by knee to chest, child's pose. When I do core exercises, I feel no difference. Yes, so this is another good example of the common error that you guys make all the time around understanding how exercises work. Knee hugs and child's pose are given out time and time again because they feel nice. Why do they feel nice? Because you are enlarging that space and the holes come out. Exercises do not work like that. When you do an exercise for stability-wise, you often will actually, when you're learning them, you might even feel a bit worse afterwards because you did them incorrectly. The benefit that comes from doing strengthening work is cumulative over successive weeks and months, if done correctly. And unfortunately, so many people like Roy will get caught up in the trap of looking for something that gives a quick fix. It feels nice. Knee hugs felt nice before you injured your back. Just because they still feel nice doesn't mean they're doing anything constructive, unfortunately. And again, this is the reason for education and why it is so very important. Ryan has said here, I have back pain that wraps around and burning inside the groin. What do you think I should do? The rehabilitation work. You need to first focus on stabilizing your spine so you can stop aggravating the injury. You then need to build low tolerance in that spine and support the healing process. You can marry this with some sorts of relief-based work, such as using the towel decompression, the bed decompression underneath the lower back, lying over it to decompress the spine, the bed decompression, another great one to take pressure regularly off the spine so we can support that healing process. But by far the biggest thing that we can do is stop messing it up every day. And doing knee hugs and child's pose, like in the previous comment, stopping those is going to be a very good part of that solution. What else have we got here? PJ said, you're great, thank you. I appreciate that, PJ. I'm glad these lives do help you guys. You know, fielding questions sometimes it's it's a bit of a challenge, but hopefully it really helps you guys. And I appreciate all the comments. It makes it more fun for everybody, more helpful for me, and I feel like it's very mentally stimulating for me anyway. Hopefully it is for you guys too. It keeps me on my toes. Kim said, I got myself a Roman chair after dealing with sciatic pain. I can just close that. I'm working on gradually strengthening my back. I really do think that the Roman chairs are a bit of a waste of time and money, to be completely honest. I'm sorry to say that, Kim. But if I explain why, hopefully that helps you understand, right? At the end of the day, if you've got it, great. Right? And I keep on saying, I will get one. Maybe Black Friday, I'll go and buy one. The Roman chair, I mean, it's basically like a cot, going back to the comment earlier, right? We block our hips here, and then we just do the hip hinge. I'm not going to do that on here because I don't want to break it. But you're just blocking your hips, and then you're doing a hip hinge, or you're blocking your thighs, and then you're doing a hip hinge. What's one of the important things about our rehab? It is that it is applicable to daily life, so we get additional benefits. On the Roman chair, you are doing a hip hinge. Why not just do a hip hinge? It's free, and we're taking something that is applicable, the hip hinge, and making it not applicable by doing it on a Roman chair. We're also taking something that is simple, that we can do with a chair in front of us for support if we're feeling nervous, and making it complex by having to now get into this machine, have our pad in the right place, and then play around with the exercise. We're taking something that is safe. If you fail when you're doing a hip hinge, you can just hold on to the chair in front of you, catch yourself, and straighten yourself back up. If you fail when you are doing the Roman chair, because you accidentally pushed yourself too far, which does happen, if we're doing rehab, we need to factor in safety, and the Roman chair is not doing that. If we fail, what are we going to do? Catch ourselves on the handles? Maybe, depends on where we are when we fail. How are we going to get out? Now we've got to kind of eke ourselves out of the machine. It's just taking a simple exercise that's free to do and having the pleasure of having to buy a piece of equipment that makes everything less helpful, less safe, less applicable, less useful. Now, are there people that get great results? Because fundamentally, you're just doing a hip hinge. Yes, there are, and I appreciate that, and I'm so happy that there are people that are getting results with this. That's all that I really care about. But if you're someone new who doesn't have one, you don't need one. It's a waste of time, money, and hopefully, if you've got any pushback on that, please do push back. Please do push back, right? But I think your struggle on the points of criticism are that it's exactly the same movement, you're just making it more complex by adding in the variables, you're making it cost people more money. It's also much more difficult to actually build in terms of the load that you're using, because now you're trapped in this machine and you have to go and pick up some weight to actually progress, unless you've got the courtesy or the luxury of having someone who's going to give you the weights. So it just doesn't make sense. It's one of those pointless differentiators, in my opinion, especially for most people with back pain. Michael said, how many weeks? And I definitely started out when I got questions about that, because I know there's programs out there that use that a lot. I was definitely more reserved in my criticism, but the more I get the questions and the more I think about it to try and give a sincere comparison, the more I just think, gosh, it's a waste of time. It's just a gimmick. It just feels like a gimmick, because there's no scenario where you think that outpaces just doing a hip hinge. And one of the biggest challenges a lot of people have is excuses for starting, right? And so you can start a hip hinge from day one with no equipment. You don't need anything funny or to go to a special gym that's got one. But I will buy one. I will buy one just so I can do a better demonstration for you guys. Michael said, how many weeks after microdiscectomy can I start with strengthening? I would argue you should be like, this is the question, right? To ask your surgeons. Fundamentally, if you've just had a surgery, especially if you pay to do it privately, ask the guys, right? But the quality of the answer is often going to be related to the quality of the question. So if we ask a good question, we're going to get, hopefully, a good answer. And the question that I would have is, when can I start my rehab? I'm thinking of doing squats. And he goes, oh, you can't do squats. You go, okay, that's great. How do I get out of this chair to leave you now? Because that is a squat. So I would argue that the rehabilitation process really starts straight away. They say you should just do walking and don't sit too much. That's great. How did I get out of bed in the morning? Right? These are the points that I'm putting to you guys to think about. I can't tell you what to do. Do whatever you want to do. But I'm just trying to help get you guys thinking, get those wheels going, and you go and have a chat with your surgeon and say, hey, doc, what do you think about me doing some hip hinges? What do you think about me doing some squats, right? Hip hinges. You are going to get your shoes on to do the walking that the surgeon is telling you to do in those early days after the operation. How are you going to get those shoes on? You are going to step out of your front door somehow, right? The guidance is so poor after surgery. I would argue that you need to be thinking about rehabilitation day one. If you've been sent out of the hospital, you are going to do a handful of things that are more strenuous than careful, controlled rehabilitation. Right immediately. Clip that bit and ask that question to your surgeon. And so you can either have instruction or you can not. And then that's up to you. To wait 6 weeks, it just makes no sense. I struggle to see why we're waiting 6 weeks to do anything constructive, to get any formal guidance. It's like we've got a big problem in a very vulnerable individual who's just had surgery, and we're going to give them no support for 6 weeks. I really struggle to see the logic in that thinking, quite honestly. I really do. I mean, at the very least, we can make the statement, I think you're very vulnerable, so we'll give you lots of learning to do. Maybe that's something. Ryan has said, I started decompression, squats, hip hinge, dead bug, so thank you. Awesome. That's good to hear, Ryan. I'm glad to hear it. Coming over to TikTok, guys, you've got a lot of comments on here. Guys, we are 20 minutes to go. So hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. I'm going to go through some more of the comments that are over on TikTok and have a look through there. If you guys have any more, please do post them in the comment section. We'll keep rolling for another 20. And if you know anyone else that's struggling, you want them to join the live, please do share it with them. And don't forget, guys, we're going live reasonably frequently. This is the last one for this week. We're going to be doing probably live again next Monday. And so if you check out the YouTube channel on the page there, it's like /@backinshape/live. In the live tab, you'll see when we schedule the live, and you can press a button there to get notified. It's just easier for you guys. I've got all of your YouTube stuff up on here, so I can see all the comments very neatly. Whereas on TikTok, it turns into a bit of carnage sometimes. So I'm going to try and do my best here to go back through the YouTube. And Nero, for example, go onto YouTube, because I can see things better there, please. Why would some be able to load aggravation-free but still have symptoms? Because it's the load, it's the amount of load that we're doing. So, for example, Nero, with those chair squats, right? Your current squat aggravation-free is this. Yet you have to sit in this chair there. Because what we've got, and a great video for you guys to watch, send a DM after this. And in fact, on YouTube, I'm going to get the video, and then I'm going to come back to Nero's comment, because it's a really important one to understand. Let me get it up for you guys on YouTube. And I could paste this in the chat. There we go. If you're live, hopefully this will come in. Yes, it will. Great. So you guys can watch that on YouTube. If you're on TikTok, just send us a DM. Say, hey, Mike, can you send me the recovery podcast? That'll be helpful. So why is it we have symptoms? Because we have a certain level of capacity. When we've maybe had a surgery, when we've injured our back, we have a certain level of capacity, which is our current conditioning, which includes the strength of the muscles. It includes the strength of the back. It includes the coordination of the individual, their ability to move themselves in the real world. And that's at a certain level, and we'll call this the capacity level. And then we've got a certain requirement that daily life exerts. In order to successfully move through daily life without overwhelming this body, you need to be at this level of capacity to eke up and control this level of strain. And so the reason is that, and this is why the exercises are so helpful, because we know, near example, that your squat can only go to here. Yet every single day, even from the start of the day when you get out of bed, you are having to squat from down here. And so this is why symptoms persist until such a time that we get our level of capacity to be above our level of daily strain. We will persist in having the opportunity to experience flare-ups from one day to the next. And this is such an important concept so that you have the motivation and understanding to move forwards, knowing that everyone starts at a different place in the recovery process. Some of you guys are a lot weaker than others. I mentioned, I think yesterday on the live session, one of the patients that came in here to the clinic, within a week to a month of a very large herniation, which I'd seen on the imaging, the guy's doing squats on 70 kilos. Within a couple of months, like 1 or 2, he's testing the boundaries on 120 kilos. Why? Because that individual's coming in at a different level than the average person with a raging herniation, significant in magnitude. But he's already got a significant level of competence so that he can already do a squat whilst controlling the spine to a reasonable depth. So the many things that he has to do every day are not of significant enough magnitude to overstrain that healing herniated disc. Whereas this is why the exercises are so powerful, because the moment you go, I can't squat, and this is also why we talk about the load of sitting, how much load is going through your spine. So so for example, what do I say? I'm 20 kilos, right? So I'm holding somewhere between this, when I sit down, and this. If I herniate my disc tomorrow, touch wood, I won't, even when I sit down, I will be carrying this extra amount of load through my spine. 36 kilos, 80 pounds. When I sit down, it strains through the posterior fibers. Best case scenario, it's only this. So if I'm still doing this on my squat, well, is it any wonder that I'm going to be at the mercy of daily flare-ups? And what does that mean? It's a little bit depressing in the first instance, but it just means I've got to do the work. I'm there when I'm there. It's like going on a journey, say from here in Gloucestershire over to London and going, well, I'm sat at the top of Birdlip Hill, which is nearby, about a mile, 2 miles out of town, going, why am I not in London? Well, because the engine's in park and I haven't hit drive. I haven't made enough progress. And you're in London when you're in London. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. Nearer. Hopefully that does clarify things. Everybody starts at a different place. And unfortunately, some people start earlier on. And if you start, not earlier on, but from a deeper hole, right? Unfortunately, the most important thing is you start. You compare yourself to what you were a week ago, what you were a month ago, and what you were capable of doing. You do not compare yourself to other people in their rehabilitation process. You only compare yourself to yourself. That's the most important thing. And you ask yourself the question, or you have the realization that you are going to get flare-ups from one moment to the other. And they're going to be because of the things that you've done every single day outside of the exercises. And you continue to work on producing results in the rehabilitation, always observing aggravation-free reps and correct choreography. And we will steadily build resilience. And we'll start to notice these improvements. But we notice improvements in our ability to execute the exercises before we notice the improvement in our ability to do we notice improvements in our ability to perform the rehab before we notice our improvement in our ability, in our symptoms. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Got my words a bit jumbled up there at the end, but we got there in the end. Just linking back to some of the YouTube comments here. Nikki has said, keep up the great work. Thank you very much, Nikki. Michael has said, I was given no advice, but I watched all your videos. I'm so grateful. Thank you, that's kind. And I'm sorry I had to. Sorry I had to give you the advice, Michael. Because really it should be there. The support should be there. But I mean, especially if you're here in the UK, the NHS is so overwhelmed, they just can't. It would be better if they just said, hey, sorry, we can't help you, go online and have a look. That would be better. PSYBE says, what are your thoughts on lateral shift correction? Focus on fixing the symptoms. People get tied into all sorts of peculiar knots when they have an injury and they're focused on the fact that the hip's one side or the other. It's very normal to get an antalgic lean to one side or the other. Focus on doing your exercises as square as possible and everything will straighten up. What we do, unfortunately, is we get someone who's got a little bit of a tilt, or maybe they feel one side a bit more than the other, and they start trying to fix that, which involves extreme skill and poise, whilst they currently can't even do that. And we're putting the cart before the horse. Build objective strength through the simple rehab, and then when you get to the other side, so to speak, if you still have some of those slight variations from one side to the other, then you can eke those out afterwards. But most people, by the way, will have some sort of asymmetry, left to right. Not least of all because most people, when they stand in the queue at the shops, do not stand like a soldier. They stand leaning on one side more than the other. And it's only when they actually have a problem or an injury that they go, oh gosh, my left hip's really tight. I need to fix my left hip tightness first. It's like, no, your left hip's been tight for the last 30 years, right? It's nothing to do with your back injury. Sure, your back injury has made it worse, but it's nothing to do with your back injury. So hope that helps. Just going through a couple more comments. Have a quick look through over here. What was that question about F45? We'll get you a coffee once I've got double shift. Yes, you can. You can. You can definitely get me a coffee. You'll get there. You will get there, Neera. You're not as far off as you think. Brendan said, with herniation and retrolysis, should I stop F45? I've done 18 PT sessions. I don't know where you are in the recovery process, Brendan. From my experience in F45, which is very, very small, Lara did it for a little while before Evelina, I think it was, before Evelina was born. It's not really about focus. It's about you work. It's not really about form. It's about the class structure. It's kind of like a boot campy type thing, in my experience, which may not be of all the classes and is very, very minimal. So please bear that in mind. Take it with a pinch of salt. That's not really rehab. I would suggest we should be doing rehabilitation. If you've done rehabilitation, you've built up a good base, then you can do whatever you want. That's the idea. Even with a retrolysis, even with a herniation, the idea is that if you've done the rehab properly, you've built up strength and resilience in an objective manner, and then you can go back to whatever you want to do. Now, can you be silly? So a great example here of me being silly. So you guys know I've torn both the meniscus in my left knee a couple months back, and earlier this week I was back up to squatting 100 kilos for 10 reps, and I played paddle last week for an hour and a half. I could feel my knee getting strained. I was like, ooh, because I don't do running around, and I certainly don't do running around changing directions. And I was like, oh God, that's feeling a bit tough. So I'm gonna play paddle tomorrow. We're gonna see what happens. We'll see what happens, see how it goes, but I'm going to definitely dial it down to see if I can manage that strain. So you can do anything, but how you get into the thing will dictate whether you have success or failure. Because a lot of us, we get excited when we get back into sport, back into fun, back into these things, and our mind catches up to that a lot faster than our body can. You just have to expose your body to the stimulus and respect that the stimulus is different and give your body time to adapt to it. Running is another great example that people get caught out in. They don't give their body time enough to adapt to the strain of running and the way in which it's different to what they're used to exposing themselves to, that they try and do a couch to 5K and then have a herniated disc by the end of the period, or if not before. Or they have knee issues, etc., etc. So give yourself more time. The tissues that you're looking to adapt are ligamentous tissues. They're the disc fibers, they're the bones themselves. These tissues respond a lot more slowly than the cardiovascular system, than your muscular system. And so you can so often outpace what your body is conditioned to do. That's not to say you're old and you can't do it. It's just to say that you've got to respect, at all ages, the fact that certain things change faster than others. What other questions have we got here? Venom has said, I have a large L5 transverse process with a sacral pseudoarthrosis, might be something like Bertolotti syndrome. What's your advice? It doesn't change. To the degree you've got some sort of anatomical variations, if you don't move it, it can't get injured. The principles of a neutral spine is that you are learning to hold and stabilize your spine because you irritate yourself when you move funny. You weren't still perfectly and hurt your back. You were still and then you moved. You were moving and then you turned. Every single one of you guys, flare yourself up. When you go to move, you experience the pain. It is not while you are still. It's that you made a little move, you shifted on one side or the other. It was the movement that aggravates you. That's the issue. And so learning to stabilize the spine is important. To the degree we have something like a large L5 transverse process and a pseudoarthrosis, which basically means a connection. You can see on the vertebra here, right? This is the L5, which is this green little bit here. That's the transverse process. And then there's the sacrum here. And for some people, a normal version of what we could call sacralization or lumbarization is the fact that this vertebra here, which should be separate, is connected in some way through a pretend joint or a what shouldn't be there joint. And the point is here that it's been there your whole life. It's been there your whole life and you haven't had pain. That's the important takeaway here. So there's no reason you can't deal with the back injury that has taken place, maybe at that segment, maybe more likely above, and be in a position where you don't have pain again. But you've got to do the rehab work, and it's got to be stillness. It's got to be stabilization. It's got to be control. That is what is missing. And you're paying for it, unfortunately. But that's what you can do. One of the guys here has asked, he wants to make sure that losing weight will help it heal. Losing weight doesn't help it heal per se, but losing weight, if you've got a load-bearing structure and it's injured, bearing more load is obviously going to be disadvantageous. However, just focus on the rehab. Yes, if you want to make some changes to your dietary side of things, don't starve yourself. I would suggest you look at your diet. A lot of people, as is evident by the prevalence of diabetes and heart disease, most people don't eat properly and don't have an awareness of eating real food, getting enough protein on a daily basis and all that kind of stuff. So if you're overweight, it would suggest that we're probably not getting the diet right. And by the way, you can be inactive and lose weight by just having the right diet. It's just calories in, calories out is probably the best baseline for you to understand and appreciate, and getting enough of your protein intake on board. I don't think it needs to be overly complicated, although a lot of people will tell you it does. Don't try and go, oh, well, I've got a bad back, so I'll try and lose weight, and I'll go and spend 4 hours a day on the Stairmaster. That is not a wise move. What else have we got here? We're coming up towards the end of the live stream, guys. Last 5 minutes, so I'll keep going through some of the questions. If you've got any, post them in here. What else have we got? I'm recovering from a disc bulge and currently tilted to the side. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Layla. Your advice has been a blessing. It's a pleasure. Would you say it's better to do the core 5 in the morning? I feel by evening I'm in more pain. If you find, Leanne, that the morning is better for you, then that's okay. But you've got to make sure you're progressing the rehab. Typically, I'd say the middle of the day tends to be better. But for certain people, they find the morning. For others, it is also better in the evening. I don't know who that is. Let me remove that person. There we go. Oh, we don't get that very often. Please don't spam in the TikTok chat, asking people to subscribe to you. What else have we got? Comments in here. Guys, I'm going to try and finish this up. That's nice, Leanne. I'm here with you. We can do this. That's awesome. What else have we got here? Any last comments? I was deep in the hole. Through this knowledge, I'm coming out of it. That's good to hear. Good to hear, Leanne. Just keep making progress. Viron, is it any tips for sitting at the desk all day? Posture, positions? Viron, send us a DM. We have a dedicated Back Pain at Work podcast, just because we're getting towards the end of the live. That does the best job of explaining it and giving you some strategies to use. So send us a DM after the live. Guys, I think we're nearly there. Last few. Alfie, Ali, 5 months post-disc surgery, consistent with rehab, but trouble with building up lifting weight. It is common for people to struggle to make transitions. We were discussing this actually on the live stream yesterday with Tara's question. Often it's the size of the step, the size of the increment that you're trying to go up in. Maybe it's you just add in 1 or 2 reps. Maybe it's you add in a smaller step. For example, going from 12 to 15 kilos, go from 12 to 13 kilos. Break it down into smaller pieces. Additionally, look at the other variables. What other exercises are we doing? We try and keep the exercises in the program very, very simple. Those of you guys that are in the program as well, if you are struggling with anything, please, please, please use the members area. Add detail. Let us know where you're up to on the hip hinges. Let us know where you're up to on the squats. This information is so helpful in helping you guys better. So make sure that you do that. Where are we? Any tips for lasting damage to the sacrum regarding exercises? Rose, I don't particularly subscribe to damage to the sacrum specifically. The sacrum is a bone, so the only way you're really going to damage that is if you like fell on it and shattered it, in which case it's a broken bone and that's going to need to go through a healing process. Eduardo has said, what's your opinion on red light therapy? I'm not a big fan of red light therapy in that I think it's very inefficient in terms of time, so you're going to need to be there for like an hour for it to fundamentally do anything, and maybe we're better off just going on a holiday and sitting on a beach. I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but in order to get actual dosage that's going to do anything for the lower back anyway, like you need to be using something more powerful. The laser, class 4 laser, is very helpful, and we've got a lot of experience using that. That was something, as I've mentioned many times before, I used significantly on my knee pre-comp after that injury. Christian said my macrophages are very lazy. They need to up their game. Yeah, if I knew a way to increase those, I would let you know. Finally, Layla has said, finally can do a towel decompression for 1 minute. Squats and hip hinges has pushed my recovery. That's awesome. When does sciatica become chronic? I got it in January this year. Generally speaking, a problem or an injury, it's an injury, not the sciatica, it's the injury that's causing the sciatica, is chronic after around about 12 weeks. And the problem with the chronicity is that it starts to make you do things that are just kind of like you don't even know you're doing them anymore, and you're kind of tripping yourself up. But guys, that's been the hour. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. If you need any more help, guys, I would recommend, if you're on TikTok, you can go check out the link in the profile page. Watch the video there. It explains a little bit more about the program and how we can help you guys. We will be back next week on Monday on the lives. We'll put the scheduled live up over on the YouTube channel. Thank you to all of you guys on TikTok that asked questions. I will say again that going onto the YouTube channel is probably the best place to ask the questions. So if you see we're live, head over to the YouTube channel just because there's more comments. It's easier for me to manage the comments there. Guys, those of you on YouTube as well, I've pasted in the pinned chat if you need any more help. No, I haven't pasted it in the pinned chat, because I messed up the live stream a couple of times before we went live today, but I'll paste it in a pinned comment. You guys know where to go, website backinshapeprogram.com if you need more help and support. I would strongly suggest, if you have been struggling for a long period of time with your back pain, with your sciatica, you need a structured plan, what to do, go over to the website, have a look at some of the videos that explain what we do in the program so you can get an idea and then sign up. It's a great time to start and get things significantly moved along before Christmas comes around. Because as soon as Christmas comes around in a couple of months, people start doing things a little bit different. And if we've got that little bit of forewarning, foreknowledge, we can minimize any aggravation that often happens between Christmas and New Year's Day. So thanks, guys, on TikTok. See you next time. Have a great weekend. And those of you guys on YouTube, thank you very much for joining. See you next time.